Hey, this is Off the Cuff, and I'm Steve from TorahFamily.org. I believe this could be one of the most important teachings I've ever made. Not long ago, I made a teaching titled The Day of Atonement in Prophecy. If you haven't seen that teaching, I believe you'll find it interesting at least. Ever since I made that teaching, I keep thinking just how much it makes sense and how the resurrection could really take place on a future Day of Atonement. Now, for those who are quick to say, well, no man knows the day or the hour, Steve, please see our written teaching simply titled Knowing the Day. I believe you'll find it of interest as well. Now, that being said, let's look at the instructions given to us regarding the special day called the Day of Atonement. Leviticus 23. And Yahweh spoke to Moses, saying, Now, on the 10th day of this 7th month is the Day of Atonement. It shall be for you a time of holy convocation, and you shall afflict yourselves and present a food offering to Yahweh. And you shall not do any work on that very day, for it is a day of atonement, to make atonement for you before Yahweh your God. For whoever is not afflicted on that very day shall be cut off from his people. And whoever does any work on that very day, that person I will destroy from among his people. You shall not do any work. It is a statute forever throughout your generations in all your dwelling places. It shall be to you a Sabbath of solemn rest, and you shall afflict yourselves. On the 9th day of the month, beginning at evening, from evening to evening, you shall keep your Sabbath. First, please note that besides the regular weekly Sabbath, the Day of Atonement is the only other day that is biblically called a Sabbath. The other holy days that are traditionally called high Sabbaths are actually never referenced as Sabbaths in the Scriptures. They are simply referenced as days where we do no regular work. But regarding this day, what does it mean to afflict ourselves? It's referenced 3 times in these verses. I think this is something we should be mindful of. Some say it can mean fasting. Others say it has nothing to do with fasting. While opinions may vary on what it can mean, I believe there is little doubt it should include the element of humbling ourselves. Please consider a couple of examples of people who humbled themselves and spared themselves of wrath because of the way they humbled themselves. Consider Ahab, 1 Kings 21. Have you noticed how Ahab has humbled himself before me? Because he has humbled himself, I will not bring this disaster in his day, but I will bring it on his house in the days of his son. Well, how did Ahab humble himself? Please consider the previous verse. When Ahab heard these words, he tore his clothes, put on sackcloth, and fasted. He lay in sackcloth and went around meekly. Now, let's read that again. When Ahab heard these words, he tore his clothes, put on sackcloth, and fasted. He lay in sackcloth and went around meekly. So, could this be considered that he afflicted himself? Is this something we need to consider in how we should approach the Day of Atonement? Look what the king of Nineveh did in regards to the humbling of himself along with the whole nation after being warned by Jonah. Jonah chapter 3. When the news reached the king of Nineveh, he rose from his throne, took off his royal robes, covered himself with sackcloth, and sat down in the dust. Then he issued a proclamation in Nineveh. By the decree of the king and his nobles, do not let any man or beast, herd or flock, taste anything. Do not let them eat or drink, but let man and beast be covered with sackcloth. Let everyone call urgently on God. Let them give up their evil ways and their violence. Who knows? God may relent and with compassion turn from his fierce anger so that we will not perish. When God saw what they did and how they turned from their evil ways, he had compassion and did not bring upon them the destruction he had threatened. Again, could this be considered that he afflicted himself? Is this something we need to consider in how we should approach the Day of Atonement? Now, did you notice the similarity of how these men humbled themselves? They both fasted and they both wore sackcloth. One sat around meekly, meaning humbly, and the other sat in ashes, which basically means he humbled himself. I would definitely say that falls in the category of afflicting yourself. But was it done for just one day, and then life goes back to normal to their evil ways afterwards? No. They went the extra mile in humbling themselves and refused to go back to their evil ways. That's what the Day of Atonement is all about. That's the point of the Day of Atonement. It's not just to humble ourselves for one day. It's the reminder that we are to walk humbly all the days of our lives. In fact, that very well may be why we read what we do in Isaiah 58. These people were fasting, yes, but they weren't truly humbling themselves on that day. And the verses show how they surely weren't living a life of humility. That's what this day is to remind us of. He wants a fast that produces a humble life. That's the kind of fast he longs for us to do. One that changes our lifestyle, not one that only interrupts it. We are to live a life in humility. Matthew 23:12. For whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and whoever humbles himself will be exalted. Even Yeshua humbled himself. After he did, Yahweh exalted him. If we are wanting to hear, "Well done, good and faithful servant," should we do any less? The Day of Atonement was when the high priest went into the Holy of Holies to make atonement for himself first and then for the people. Now, during that time, the people were praying and watching for the high priest to come out. They wanted to know if the sacrifice had been accepted. They did this in hopes that judgment wouldn't come. Now, think about that. They were watching for him to come out and praying the whole time. Does that sound familiar? Watching and praying? It should. Please consider Luke 21:36. Be always on the watch and pray that you may be able to escape all that is about to happen and that you may be able to stand before the Son of Man. Yeshua is our high priest in the heavenly temple. How fitting it is for us to humble ourselves on this day the same way as prescribed in the Torah and watch and pray for his return. It's truly the day all of his bride is made spotless at the same moment. What better time for him to come for his bride than at that very instant? Plus, something many forget is how a shofar is to be blown on this day when it's time to announce the coming Jubilee. So, a shofar is blown on the Day of Atonement every 49th year. Now, I've heard lots of debates on when the real Jubilee is. One person says this, and another person says that. Then others say something completely different from those. I truly believe only Yahweh knows the true count of the Jubilees. However, our focus should be to walk humbly in Him at all times. Sometimes I think we forget who we are, that being unworthy servants, just as Yeshua said in Luke 17:10. I believe the Day of Atonement is the one day given to us so we don't forget that fact, that we are truly unworthy servants. Unworthy servants. It's for us to not let pride set into our lives, so we don't let ourselves think we're better than our brothers or our sisters. We know who we are without Him. We know who we are without Him. May we never forget that. In fact, again, I truly think it's the Day of Atonement that's there for us so we don't forget that. It's only by His grace and His mercy that we have hope. When someone is unworthy, they know where they stand. They don't stand. They get on their knees. Thus, the Day of Atonement, the day we afflict ourselves as instructed to remind us who we are without Him, helpless without Him. And one day, I believe quite possibly on a future Day of Atonement, He'll return for His bride and do as He says in Isaiah 61. He will turn our mourning into rejoicing. Let's read it, and I'll pick up reading where Yeshua left off in Luke 4, verses 18 and 19. Again, Isaiah 61, picking up where Yeshua left off. And the day of vengeance of our God, to comfort all who mourn and provide for those who grieve in Zion, to bestow on them a crown of beauty instead of ashes, the oil of gladness instead of mourning, and a garment of praise instead of a spirit of despair. They will be called oaks of righteousness, a planting of Yahweh for the display of His splendor. Now, does this sound similar to the kings we looked at earlier? However, this time, these people will have their sorrow turned into dancing. The first half of these verses were fulfilled at Yeshua's first coming. It only seems to fit that the rest will be fulfilled at His return. And from the looks of it, it sure seems to fit the Day of Atonement. Or, as I like to call it, the Day of At-One-ment. So, what should we be doing on this day? Well, I suppose that will be between you and our Heavenly Father. I can only say for me and my house that we will be taking this day much more seriously. And now, it's not that we haven't taken it seriously in times past. With each passing year, we've actually gotten more and more serious with it. I suppose it's just taken on a whole new meaning for us from here on out now. And we hope and pray it does for you too. Well, that's all I have. Think about it. Pray about it. But more than anything, be a doer of the word and not a hearer only. Until next time, Shalom.